Hello everybody and welcome back, and today I'll be talking about my thoughts on the DCEU now that everything's done, now that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has come out and it was seen by some people. I figured I'd give my thoughts on what I thought of the DCEU as a whole and each movie specifically. One thing that I'm not going to go over too much is Snyder's specific vision, because that involves a lot of the movies that we didn't get, and I want this video to focus on the movies that we did get and how we got them, and just my general opinions about each one. So I'll save the Snyder vision specifically for another video, but why don't we go ahead and jump right on into it with my general overview opinion of the DCEU. Now, before we go into the general overview, make sure you stay till the end, because I will actually have ranked all of the DCEU movies. All 16 of them I have ranked. So stay tuned at the end to hear my ranking on the DCEU. Now, let's go into the general overview. So the first word that comes to mind when I think of the DCEU is, unfortunately, disappointment. I mean, for me, I had grown up with Justice League and Justice League Unlimited as part of my superhero-filled childhood. Like, when I first got into superheroes, it was the Justice League Unlimited shows with Teen Titans, the 1994 Spider-Man show, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and the Hugh Jackman X-Men movies. That was my superhero childhood. And that was right up to when Iron Man came out. So that's like the pre-Iron Man stuff. That's what, for me personally, I enjoyed. And Justice League and Justice League Unlimited were some of my favorite superhero shows ever. And I've probably seen that, First Contact, forget the name of the episode, it's escaped me at the moment, but that first 3 episodes of Justice League, where it's Martian Manhunter and the team assembles and they go up against the White Martians. I've seen that I don't know how many times as a kid. I loved that one. I mean, Secret Origins, that's what it was called, Secret Origins. And so when DC announces they're going to make a Marvel-styled cinematic universe of their heroes, and that they're going to start with a Superman movie, it's like, yes, please, I want to see this. And then now that the movies have come out, and 10 years later, the universe is dead. 10 years into Marvel, they made Infinity War. Like, if DC took their time, we very well could be on our Justice League Apocalypse. Getting ready for, instead of Endgame, Omega. It's like, we could very well be around that point right now. Unfortunately, that never happened. And so, that's the biggest word I can come up with, is disappointment. That being said, there are some highs and lows, and I'll go through those highs and lows when we go through the specific movies later on in this video. As a whole, it's not very good. I enjoyed Man of Steel more than a lot of other Superman fans. I mean, I get where a lot of people come from, where they say that it's not the best interpretation of Superman, and I agree. I believe the best interpretation of Superman that was put to film was, unfortunately, over 45 years ago in 1978 with Christopher Reeves' Superman. That was probably the best interpretation of Superman. I would even say Brandon Routh's was better in terms of interpretation of Superman than Snyder's and Cavill's. That being said, Cavill is the face of Superman for me because of this movie. I've seen this movie I don't know how many times. I love it. When you compare it to, in terms of enjoyability, if you compare it to those Christopher Reeve Superman movies, I enjoy watching Man of Steel a lot more, even if I recognize that Christopher Reeve and Richard Donner's Superman movies are better Superman movies. That's my general opinion on Man of Steel. Other than that, I mean, General Zod by Michael Shannon in this movie is phenomenal. He is General Zod to me. And when he gives his speech after the world engines have destroyed and they're kneeling and sitting in a shouldn't have been destroyed Metropolis, because Snyder loves to destroy crap. He's essentially just a moody Michael Bay. It's like when they're standing there in that crater and he gives that speech about he's lost his purpose, like, my soul, that is what you've taken from me. That speech gives me chills every time I hear it. Michael Shannon nailed General Zod, and it was perfect, and I was here for it. The last note I'll give on Man of Steel before moving on into Batman vs. Superman. Good Lord, that score is just beautiful. I mean, I've listened to, like, if you go to Spotify, look up the soundtrack, there's a 25, 30 minute, like, sketchbook for what Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL wrote for the Man of Steel soundtrack. I've listened to that I don't know how many times. That whole, well, first of all, the whole soundtrack, but just that track, just the sketchbook alone, it is gorgeous. Flights is such a good Superman theme. So, moving on into Batman vs. Superman, this is where things really just get off the rails. And the biggest thing I have with this movie is basically everything done in it was done way too early. I think we shouldn't have teamed up characters this early on. I could see the writing on the wall that this is going to be the start of a Justice League movie before the movie even came out. I believe we should have gotten a Batman movie by itself to start with. For what it's worth, I feel like how Batman was brought into this world where he was introduced as Bruce Wayne going into Metropolis and witnessing the events of the end of Man of Steel, and that is what causes him to hate Superman. I feel like that was very, very well adapted. I loved kind of seeing that scene again from a different perspective. It was really, really cool, but ultimately I feel like that teaming up characters was just way too early. I mean, the DCEU had its second movie 2013, 14, 15, 2014, 2015, 2016. 3 years later. So Marvel had 2009, 2010, 2011. By that point, they had Hulk, Captain America, and Iron Man 2, and I think Thor as well. Basically, the entire Phase 1 of Marvel happened the same time as it took to get to movie 2 of DC. And when Warner Bros. Isn't really giving you a lot to work with in terms of turnaround time, it's like you're relying on one director when now's the time of the Snyder Vision. I get it. It just seemed too slow, and they're still trying to catch up in terms of, 3 years later, he team up the team. Anyway, whatever. And the last point is the Martha scene. It's bad. It just is. I mean, the one thing I'll say about it is, for the story, it makes sense. The biggest thing I'd change is take the word Martha and replace it with my mom or my mother. Rewatch the scene with those changes, and you'll see how it really fixes the scene and how dumb using the connection between Martha, they're both their moms being Martha. It was kind of dumb. Now the next movie is David Ayer's, or 2016's, Suicide Squad, and I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with this one is also the Ayer cut drama, because this movie was supposed to come out as this dark drama, not that kind of dark comedy that we ended up getting. According to David Ayer, to paraphrase, he effectively says that his movie, just like Snyder's Justice League, was butchered on the editing room floor without his knowledge, and they did this to match the energy that Deadpool was. When Deadpool came out, it was of course, R-rated, raunchy comedy superhero movie that kind of rewrote a lot of what we expect from comedies and superhero movies. Suicide Squad had character Harley Quinn and had, Will Smith and a lot of these really funny people, and either funny people or funny characters. And so Warner Brothers decided that they believed that Suicide Squad could match Deadpool's success if they turned it into a comedy. And so that's why when you watch the very first Suicide Squad trailer, it is meant to portray the movie as a dark comedy. But if you watch the later trailers and the movie we ended up getting, it more matches that of a dark comedy. And I think this movie would have been better as a drama. I'm not talking like a Forrest Gump type drama. I'm talking like this movie being as dark as it was, having comedic moments, but having it be more serious. I know, DC being dark and serious. Oh no, it's another dark and serious DC movie. Oh, what are we going to do? You're going to enjoy a movie. That's what you're going to do. Because I believe that if this was truly done dark and serious and went 100% into it, that with the incredible costumes and makeup this movie had, and all these other aspects, that this could have been done very, very well. Next movie is, of course, Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman is arguably the best movie in this entire universe. It's truly incredible. It's a slow burn, but when it burns hard. It is such a great movie. Gal Gadot is Wonder Woman to me. I loved her as Wonder Woman. She was phenomenal. And Chris Pine was just very, very enjoyable to watch as Steve Trevor. I loved a lot of the side characters in this movie. I think the villain was actually very well done. I loved that Ares was the villain. But I loved how we fully expected was it Ludendorff to be the villain, to be Ares. I mean, it was kind of laying it on a little thick, and so it's like, oh, he's obviously not going to be Ares. But I feel like David Thewlis, when he comes back and is like, no, I'm Ares. You know, it's like, I felt like that twist, although it wasn't like amongst the greatest of twist villains ever, was still very well done, and it definitely fooled me in the theater. And lastly, about this movie, I mean, the soundtrack is phenomenal. This was a Christmas gift from my parents when I started collecting records, and I've listened to this I don't know how many times, and it never, ever gets old. So, I mean, Wonder Woman is arguably the best DCEU movie. Now, moving on into the theatrical cut of Justice League, this movie just sucks. Like, it's my least favorite of all the DCEU movies. So, slight spoilers for my ranking at the end of the video, but I can't get over how bad this is. Like, it's one of the worst superhero movies to me ever made, and it's got some good points to it that I prefer to Snyder's version, but there's only like 2 or maybe 3. And the 2 or 3 high points that I actually prefer that's in this version are, number 1, there's a conversation that Bruce Wayne has with Alfred, and that involves where Bruce talks about how Clark Kent is more human than he is. And that conversation, I feel like, was like ripped from a, world's finest comic, or, it's so, I just love that, that line of he's more human than I am. Talking about an alien that he hated in the last movie. By the end of that movie, by the end of Batman vs. Superman, they had started to get along. And so the fact that Bruce Wayne at this point, when he recognizes that Clark Kent is Superman, like he's this, great person, like he's more human than I am, the line is, I love that line. I guess another thing that I am realizing in the moment is Superman in this movie is how Superman should be characterized. It's at least more accurate than Snyder's version, because he seemed more, whenever he was on screen, he did seem more positive. He did seem less moody. He did seem less angsty. And he seemed very true to like that Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve type Superman. So that is one aspect. Plus I loved the very beginning of the movie, the opening scene. I know the mustache is bad. That's another point to make, is that the CGI removed mustache because, of course, at the time of reshoots, Henry Cavill was shooting Mission Impossible Fallout and growing a mustache and couldn't shave it. So they shot with the mustache and CGI'd it out, and it didn't look good at all. So, but that opening scene where he's talking to the kids and he's like talking to them about, his heritage, he's talking to them about what he thinks of Earth and what his suit means. That's exactly what I'd love to see more from. That's what I would have loved to see more of in the DCEU, and what I hope to see in James Gunn's future Suicide Squad, He has Suicide Squad. James Gunn's DCEU, excuse me. And so with the theatrical cut of Justice League, it's just atrocious. It's bad. Everything about it is better in Zack Snyder's Justice League outside of a line and how Superman is characterized. But I still prefer Snyder's Justice League in every other way. Now, moving on into Aquaman, I don't know how this has happened in the last handful of months, year or two or so. I don't know when this truly started. I only picked up on it 6 or 7 months ago, probably. But this movie apparently wasn't actually that liked, despite making over $1 billion in the box office. I admit there's plenty of other billion-dollar superhero movies that I prefer over Aquaman, but really, this movie's awesome. Like, I love Aquaman 1. It's so much fun. I think it balances 3 great Aquaman villains in Orm or Ocean Master. Black Manta was brilliantly used. I loved him a lot more in this movie than he was in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, but that was still fun. And then even the Trench were really, really cool in the couple of scenes that they were able to kind of sneak in there. It was really, really cool, and I really liked what DC was able to do with Aquaman and Aquaman 1. Jason Momoa was amazing, and this whole movie was just a blast. I loved this movie. So how it's somehow underrated, I don't know, but sadly, it is. Now, going into Shazam is, by every account, made to be fun. Like, there's a difference between a great movie and a fun movie. Like, Shazam is good. Don't get me wrong. It is a good movie. I love the first Shazam movie, and I still even like the second Shazam movie, by the way. But it is, by all intents and purposes, a fun movie. You watch, like, that's the first word I think of when you say Shazam as a movie. Like, if you say, what do you think of the Shazam movie? What's the first word? I say fun. Because I loved how much personality that Asher Angel and Zachary Levi were able to give to Billy Batson / Shazam. I loved, how they were characterized. I loved Freddy. Freddy was arguably the best part of this entire movie. I loved how Mark Strong did Savannah. I thought he was very, very fun, and it was just a really, really cool villain. I loved how the 7 Deadly Sins, like, how disturbing they were. Like, it seemed like they were straight out of a horror movie, and I was there for it. Now, I may be wrong about this, but David F. Sandberg, the man who directed this movie, fun fact, also voiced Mr. Mind at the end of the movie in the post-credit scene. But if I remember correctly, I don't know of any of his other movies, but I've heard that he is primarily a horror director, similar to how Sam Raimi moved over and did, like, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, where you had a horror director take over a superhero franchise. And I thought that was a really, really nice touch. If that is true, I assume it is. Now, the next movie, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, or as I like to call it, Birds of Prey, longest name ever. Like, this leans too hard into that it's a fun movie, and it tries too hard to make it fun, where they forgot about making it good. Where Shazam towed the lines between making a fun movie and making a good movie. Birds of Prey tried to be too fun, and it just didn't work. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of colors, it's very flamboyant, and the biggest thing about this movie is the mischaracterizations of pretty much everybody that isn't Black Mask or Harley Quinn, who are the best parts of this movie. Like, Margot Robbie Harley Quinn is always a win. She's never done a bad Harley Quinn performance, ever. Even in this movie, it's still fantastic when she plays Harley Quinn. Ewan McGregor, yes, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, does a fantastic Black Mask. I really loved him in Black Mask, particularly there's a scene, I'd say about 2/3 into the movie, where him and Zaz, who I will not mention him again because that's not Zaz. That was the worst. Okay, second worst mischaracterization in this movie. Zaz was the second worst. The only character worse than him was Cassandra Cain. That was Short Round 2.0. That's not Cassandra Cain. They might have named her Cassandra Cain. That's not Cassandra Cain. It's not. So the actress does a fine job for what was written for her, who played Cassandra. I don't know her name. The character that she played wasn't Cassandra. It was Short Round. She steals one thing and now she's integral to the story. It's so dumb. Anyways, Black Mask, about 2/3 in the scene, has a scene where he is in a nightclub and he essentially makes one of his club goers dance after basically shutting down the club for a few moments. He has her stand up and like start dancing for him or something like that. I haven't seen the movie in a few years, but it was so like Ewan McGregor can do a damn good villain, and you never expect it if you like you just never expect it. Like to me, it's like that's Obi-Wan Kenobi, and now he's like he does a great villain, and so that aspect of it I love. I've already talked about Cassandra Cain. Zaz was pitiful in this movie. That wasn't Zaz. It's not. And Black Canary was okay at best. The actress was, I think, perfect for Black Canary. The writers just wanted to make her weak for some reason, so that way when she finally does a canary call, it's a big moment, which I get I sort of get the plot, like where it's like she's really overpowered if she's like at her normal scale, so we have to like dumb her down in terms of her power level. It's like, okay, I kind of get it, but it's also like that makes it less fun, and that like makes it not as good. And Huntress is forgettable. I honestly forget she's in this movie half the time. She feels just shoehorned in. It's not a Birds of Prey movie either. Where's Oracle? Like, where's Barbara Gordon in this movie? Like, nowhere. She's never even mentioned. Because Barbara Gordon doesn't exist in this universe. Jim Gordon barely exists in this universe. So, Birds of Prey, longest name ever. It's a bad movie. Now, moving on to the next movie is one that I personally enjoy, that I know a lot of people didn't. And that's Wonder Woman 1984. When I say I enjoy it, I don't say it's in my absolute favorite of this universe. It's actually probably still in my bottom half. But it's still not great. But I enjoy it. What I love about this movie, Pedro Pascal, always a win. I actually did also like Kristen Wiig's Cheetah. I think she did a pretty solid job. I think Cheetah was just, it didn't feel like Cheetah, but I feel like Kristen Wiig could do a solid Cheetah. A big thing that I didn't like about this movie is that it didn't feel in spirit to the first movie. The first movie was a lot about hope and a lot about positivity and optimism in the darkest of times. World War I, and here's Diana Prince being unbelievably positive. She is, fighting for hope and trying to rid the world of evil and war. Because she believes she has the power, and she does have the power to do so. And so, in this movie, it just doesn't feel like the first movie. I know it's still Patty Jenkins directing, and it's still Gal Gadot, and this movie I feel like had a lot of potential. But although it was very, very fun and I enjoyed it, when you look at it from the first movie, it is a big downgrade. The best, in my opinion, of this entire universe, Zack Snyder's Justice League. This movie is for the fans. Plain and simple. Like, it says that Zack Snyder is like, this movie is for the fans who clamored for it, everyone who wanted to see it. Like, it's there, and I love that it was able to happen. I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, now they gave the mouse the cookie, now they have to give them the glass of milk. Restore the Snyderverse. You know, it's like, you know, if the Snyderverse comes back, it comes back. But at the very least, we got to see a glimpse through the keyhole of what could have been in Snyder's vision. Again, saving my thoughts for Snyder's vision in a later video. Because Zack Snyder's Justice League is a 4-hour superhero epic. Like, Cyborg is perfect in this movie. Perfect. Nailed it. It's a Cyborg movie. It essentially has his origin in there. You have his development and where he becomes a hero by the end of the movie, where that line, "I'm not broken." Oh my god, hearing Cyborg say he's not broken is so nice, so cool. And then seeing Flash save everybody by actually going back in time in one of the coolest scenes ever. And seeing like Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, and Gal Gadot return as their characters again, like that was really, really cool. Everything seemed like everything made sense. Superman's like when they decide to resurrect Superman, it actually seems believable. Where it's like in the first movie, it's like, we have to resurrect Superman. Oh, how are we gonna do that? Well, we have this mother box. Let's see if this works. You know, it's like that's the theatrical cut. And Snyder cut, it's like, wait, so this thing, when they're all standing around the mother box, like, so if you light a match inside a house, the house turns to ash. But with a mother box, you can turn that ash back into a house. They're like, yeah. So it can, the word they use is, it can reinstate. It can bring things back. They're all like, are we all thinking the same thing? And then they're like, we can bring back Superman. It's like, in that sense, it's like, we can bring him back. It's like, they had accepted that he was gone. And suddenly they're like, wait a minute, we have the power to bring him back. And you do get that line of like, what if Clark's at peace? You know, what if he's happy? And that's still a point. You have Cyborg's vision into what would end up being called the Nightmare. What's a night with a KN, by the way. And, where you see Aquaman and Wonder Woman are dead and all this, like, horribleness right before Flash is like, where Cyborg then says no, where he's supposed to say go. And then Barry's like, go? And there's all, like, this whole, like, wait, are we supposed to resurrect Superman? That scene was... There's no, like, fighting in that scene, but yet you're tense the entire time. And you're not getting a sequel. Like, this is, like, a part 1 of what's supposed to be 3, but you're only going to get this movie, and yet you're still like, oh, shit. Is this actually what you're supposed to be doing? Like, it's... Oh, my God. I could go for another 5 or 10 minutes on Zack Snyder's Justice League. There's a lot more left. If you want to hear my full thoughts on this movie, leave a comment below. I would love to talk about it. And now we're post-pandemic with the first movie that I personally saw in theaters after the pandemic was over, and that was The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad. And this, I would say, is probably the most fun movie, and it's still phenomenal. Where I admit this good movie versus fun movie is not a great, like, it can't be one without the other. Obviously, you can have a great movie and have it still be fun. Shazam was both. This movie was everything Shazam was, but better. Like, every character in this movie is great. Even all the ones that die in the very beginning. Every character is just super funny, and it seems like every single character has 1 to 2 moments, even if they're only on screen for a couple of minutes. It's really, really well done. James Gunn, I hope I don't jinx this, but I love every single James Gunn movie he's ever done for superheroes. I haven't seen a lot of his other work before Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't know where to get a hold of that kind of stuff. I would enjoy watching it. Though everything Guardians on, I've seen all superhero movies, and there's not a bad one. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy is arguably the greatest superhero movie trilogy ever. And Suicide Squad is leagues better than 2016's, which, of course, we talked about that earlier. This movie, I mean, Bloodsport, Idris Elba's Bloodsport was fantastic. John Cena as Peacemaker. I'm not going to talk about the Peacemaker show, so I'll just kind of talk a little bit about that here. So funny. That introduction, the intro theme song is, you can't skip it. Like, you have to watch it every single time. It's so corny, and I love it. The show essentially blurs the lines between corny and serious, and you don't know how it can, but it does. If you never watched the Peacemaker show and you have an HBO Max account, set up a weekend binge. It's 8 episodes, I want to say. It's great. You will not be disappointed if you like anything James Gunn related, because it's still James Gunn doing it. So that's my quick bit on the Peacemaker show. When it comes to the rest of the bit of the Suicide Squad, seeing Starro the Conqueror in live action, something I never thought I'd see in a long time. I'm like, wait, so we're having Starro the Conqueror in this? And it's like, oh, when it says Project Starfish, because I didn't watch any of the trailers. For that period of my life, I just wouldn't watch movie trailers. I think the last superhero movie trailer I watched was Infinity War. So when I heard Project Starfish, I'm like, wait, is this? And it was. I'm like, oh, Starro the Conqueror, awesome. And so, yeah, I love James Gunn's Suicide Squad. Now, moving on to the next movie, we have Black Adam. And this movie, I feel like it's either you like it or you don't. There's no it's meh. It's like everyone either likes it or they don't. I feel like most people don't like this movie. I personally enjoy it. It's not phenomenal by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still a fun movie that I like a lot of the side characters in it. So, The Rock as Black Adam, I've never been a big fan of that casting. I know The Rock has lobbied himself to be Black Adam for years. Over a decade, I think he was lobbying to be Black Adam. And he really, really wanted to do it. And I can kind of see it. I don't know who I'd prefer as Black Adam, but I think he was fine. I think he did an okay job with the story that it was. I feel like the movie was very, it was overhyped. I think The Rock just did too much to overhype it. I think The Rock was trying, it felt like he was trying to shoehorn himself in as the face of the franchise, when it should have always been Cavill. Cavill should have been the RDJ of this universe, and he was for a long time, despite not even being in a lot of the movies. And The Rock just seemed like he really tried to take that, from Cavill, from all the marketing. Not that he was, but that's just the way it came off, at least to me. And so I feel like that left a lot of bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. They're like, oh, this movie better be great. So they go to watch it, and it's like, it's a 6.5, 7 out of 10. It's fun, but it's not great. We were like, oh, this movie's going to be the best superhero movie. It wasn't. It wasn't. The power did not shift. The power dynamic did not shift in the DCEU. That being said, Fate, Hawkman, best parts of the movie. I loved Dr. Fate and Hawkman. Pierce Brosnan and Aldous Hodge, I believe his name is. Aldous Hodge. Phenomenal. Loved him. The next movie is Shazam! Fury of the Gods. We have Shazam 2, a movie that I don't get why it was as disliked as it was. I remember watching it and being like, I enjoy this movie. It's not as good as the first one, but I enjoy it. I think it was very, very fun. I liked the way it kind of went. I think the villains were really, really fun. I liked seeing Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu. Rachel Zegler, this is before I heard a lot about her behind-the-scenes drama that's going on. So I couldn't care less about who she was. When watching this movie, I was like, it's fun. It's more Shazam. I loved the first one. I liked the second one. But for some reason, I remember reading a couple weeks, month later, that's it's one of the worst superhero movies ever made, according to a lot of people, and it's one of the biggest box office bombs. And the only reason I could come up with that this is why it's happening is because this is the first movie, I believe, after James Gunn announces the slate of the DCU, of his DCU, his Chapter 1, as he calls it. And so it's like everything DC does in between now and Superman Legacy doesn't matter, except for maybe The Flash, because James Gunn said The Flash was going to be the segue into his universe, which we'll get into that with The Flash. But it's like, I feel like this movie was overhated from the start, and it was just dealt a horrible hand. I think this movie is genuinely great. If you just enjoy superhero movies and you never watched it because you were afraid of it being horrible, give it a watch. Just, if you liked the first one, you never watched this one because people bashed on it and you just didn't want to watch a bad superhero movie, give it a chance. Now, with Blue Beetle, this movie was great. Okay? This movie was phenomenal. I loved the Blue Beetle movie. It was so good. So much so that I ended up getting this. Here, give me a second. I ended up getting this. This is one of those GameStop collectible pieces that they keep like behind their counters. This is a magnetic, like, this is a metal beetle that's a replica from the movie. And it's magnetic. It's like a fridge magnet, but it's actually kind of heavy, and it's really, really cool. I ended up getting this just because I was a really big fan of the movie. I saw it in a GameStop and I decided to get it. And so, Blue Beetle, what makes it great? It heavily leans into its family aspect, and I feel like I'm going to mispronounce his name. Zolo Maridueña, I believe his name is, who plays Jaime. He was perfect. He was great as Jaime. The movie was not afraid to get dark, and when it needed to be serious, it was serious. But when it's like, we're gonna be funny, the movie was hilarious. And so, the costume, the suit in this movie is arguably one of the greatest superhero costumes, superhero suits in superhero movie history. It's that good. The suit is phenomenal in this movie, and I just can't get over how good that suit is, and the way they incorporated the chords. Because for those who are unaware, Blue Beetle actually started out in this comic right here. Actually, this is not the first appearance of Blue Beetle, but it's a comic from the 80s that features Ted Korg as Blue Beetle, and Ted Korg is the original Blue Beetle before Jaime takes the beetle and becomes the character. Ted Korg's Blue Beetle is very similar to like Iron Man. He's actually what inspired Night Owl in the Watchmen movies. That's who Night Owl is based off of, is Blue Beetle, Ted Korg's version. So they incorporated that version in a very interesting way. It's sad we're not going to really see this fleshed out, but I'm excited to see that. Again, hopefully I don't mispronounce this, but Zolo Maridueña, his Blue Beetle, I'm excited to hear that he's going to return as the character for DCEU. According to James Gunn, he's still going to be Blue Beetle. It's just that this movie won't be canon, but he'll stay. George Lopez as a comic relief, brilliant. He was arguably the best side character in this movie, if not he was the best side character, because he, like the movie, was meant, like, he's funny. It's George Lopez. He has so many great, like, serious scenes in this movie. This movie bombed at the box office because Shazam bombed, and the DCU was announced, and no one cared about the DCEU anymore, and no one watched this movie. It was great. If you had not seen this movie, I don't care what your excuse is. Watch it. It is great. The superhero movie that very well could have the biggest potential of any box office bomb. This movie was announced like before the Flash show even came out, and yet it came out after it ended. The Flash movie, to sum it up, was Michael Keaton comes back as Batman, and he was great. I loved it. Sasha Calle? Is it Calle? Call? I don't know how to pronounce her last name. She was good as Supergirl. I feel like, I don't know, like, she wasn't in the movie a ton, but for what she was in it for, they got the character right. Like, Supergirl was fine. It's just I don't feel like she shined as Supergirl. So it's definitely a case of if she were to be brought back, and I know she isn't because Mila Alcock, I believe her name is, she from House of the Dragon, was just announced to be DCU's Supergirl. I would have liked to see Sasha give it one more try, because I feel like she could have done well with another stab at the character. I'm going to keep the Ezra Miller drama out of this because I just don't want to touch that. There's just so much going on with that. I'll just acknowledge that the Ezra Miller stuff exists. And that was one of, I'd say, the 3 biggest reasons why this movie flopped. The CGI was also not good. The fan service they tried to pull with, like, showing Adam West's Batman and Christopher Reeve's Superman and showing Nicolas Cage's attempt at Superman, it felt weird. It felt shoehorned in. And The Flash, although I enjoyed it, was not as bad as it seemed it was. It wasn't great. Solid 5-6 out of 10. I'll watch it again, definitely, but it's not great. And the last movie is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I'd only recently watched this just a couple of days ago, and I just gotta say, this movie was fun. It's good. I liked it. It's not as good as the first one. I felt like Black Manta was the right choice for the sequel villain. I damn near wrote this movie in my DCEU, how I would have made it in my Phase 2, where it's an Aquaman sequel where Black Manta's out to get the family, and, like, he's trying to kill Arthur Curry, and, like, he goes after, like, a lot of what this movie actually did is what I did in my what I would have done for Aquaman 2 way before this movie was even announced. So part of me was like, yes, I felt like I had good intuition of where this should go. But keeping it to the movie, it was a lot of fun. I think the best part of this was seeing Arthur and Orm interact. Like, those two, like, throughout the movie, I was watching it with my parents, and we were watching it, and I'm saying, like, they genuinely acted like brothers. Like, the scene where Orm eats a cockroach and actually kind of likes it because Arthur said, yeah, that's a surface person food. And trying to, like, get him just eat a cockroach because it's gross. And Orm weirdly likes it. And seeing those two interact throughout the movie, I felt like it was something I didn't know. It was something I didn't know I needed. And it was so funny watching Orm and Arthur interact throughout the movie. That's basically it. That's it. And last thing, why is Volko dead? When did he die? They never explain this. Not unless I missed something. They say, like, yeah, I miss Volko. Wait, where's Volko? What happened to him? Why is he dead? What, the Willem Dafoe, was he not available? Was he doing No Way Home at the time? I thought No Way Home was done way back when, like, in the pandemic. This movie was done, like, in 2021. Like, Dafoe should have been available. Where, like, why? Why is Volko dead? I'm still asking myself that question. I had to look it up. Why is Volko dead? Here's my ranking for all 16 DCEU movies. At number 16, I have the theatrical cut of Justice League. At number 15, I have Birds of Prey, longest name ever. At 14, I have Wonder Woman 1984. 13, I have 2016's Suicide Squad. At number 12, I have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. At number 11, I have The Flash. 10, I have Black Adam. 9, I have Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. 8, I have BVS. At 7, I have Shazam 1. At 6, I have Blue Beetle. 5, Aquaman 1. At number 4, I have The Suicide Squad. 3, Man of Steel. 2, Wonder Woman. And number 1, Zack Snyder's Justice League. A real worst to first there for Justice League when it came to the theatrical cut to the director's cut. And there's my video talking about the DCEU as a whole. If you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below what your thoughts on each of the DCEU movies are and your thoughts on the whole thing as a whole. Now, if you're interested in what I would have done differently with the DCEU, I highly suggest clicking the card or one of these videos on screen here, as I will put a link to the playlist where I have my entire fan fiction for what I would have done instead. How quite literally, like, starting from Man of Steel through an entire saga, what I would have done differently in the DCEU. Here's hoping that James Gunn's DCEU will be much better, and I will always appreciate the DCEU for what it was and what it could have been, and an optimistic sort of look. Just enjoying these movies, as some of them are my all-time favorites in terms of just superhero movies in general, because superhero movies are just a lot of fun. So, that all being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video and have a very lovely day.